The late June heat in Houston settles like a wet blanket over the River Oaks neighborhood. Even at 7 in the evening, I sit in my car in my grandmother's circular driveway with the engine idling, watching my relatives drift past the tall windows with cocktails in hand. Someone laughs that particular bright, performative laugh I've heard my whole life, the one reserved for moments when the family has something worth showing off. I already know what they're showing off tonight. I check the rearview mirror out of habit, the same way I check it before I walk into a surgical suite. No white coat, no ID badge clipped to my pocket. Just me in a navy dress my mother once described as a little understated for this family, and the kind of sensible flats that my aunt once said looked like I'd bought them at a pharmacy. I take a breath, cut the engine, and go inside. The foyer of my grandmother's house smells the way it always has, gardenias from the garden, something expensive burning in a candle near the staircase, and underneath it all, the particular dry coolness of a house that has been climate-controlled for 60 years. My cousin Kayla's face beams at me immediately from a framed photo on the console table near the door. It's a new addition. In the photo, she's holding an envelope, grinning so wide you can see her back teeth, and printed on the envelope in Baylor College of Medicine's familiar blue and gold are the words I've already heard about 17 times since April. Congratulations. You're in. My mother materializes from the hallway in her cream linen suit, a glass of white wine already threaded between her fingers. She looks me over the way she always does, starting at my shoes and ending somewhere around my hairline, and offers me a smile that is warm in the way a waiting room is warm. You made it, she says. Kayla was just telling everyone about orientation week. I heard, I say, though I hadn't. She loops her free arm through mine and steers me toward the living room before I can decide whether I want to go there. Just be supportive tonight. It's her moment. The living room has been rearranged subtly in the way my grandmother rearranges rooms for occasions, the best chairs pulled forward, the silver polished, the old portrait of great-grandfather Henry, rotated slightly on its hook, so he seems to be watching over the gathering with appropriate gravitas. My cousin Kayla is perched on the edge of the settee near the fireplace, which is decorative in June, dressed in a white sundress that makes her look like she stepped out of a magazine about young women with bright futures. Her mother, my Aunt Diane, sits beside her with one hand on Kayla's knee, the other gesturing elaborately at my Uncle Richard, who is nodding the way men nod when they already agree with everything being said. My grandmother, Mimi, who has been called Mimi by everyone in this family since before I was born, and whose real name I genuinely cannot recall, sits in the high-backed chair near the window that is universally understood to be her throne. She is wearing her pearls and the blue dress she reserves for significant occasions. She looks up when I enter. Claire. She says my name the way she says the names of most things she has mild opinions about, not unkindly, but without warmth. You look thin. Are you eating? Yes, Mimi. She works too much, my mother says, filling in for me the way she always does, and the conversation moves on without me, the way conversations in this room have always moved on without me. My Aunt Diane tilts toward me briefly. Claire, isn't it wonderful? Baylor, your grandmother almost cried. My grandmother, who has never in my living memory come close to crying, gives a small, dignified nod that confirms the near crying. It's a wonderful program, I say. Kayla looks at me from across the room and gives me a small, slightly complicated smile. I give her one back. We have always understood each other, Kayla and I, in the way that two people understand each other when they are both fluent in the same language but speak it differently. My Uncle Derek, my mother's brother, not Kayla's father, comes in from the back porch holding a beer and smelling of charcoal. He is a man who has made a great deal of money in commercial real estate and has never felt the need to be subtle about it. He looks at me and spreads his arms like he's surprised to see me, though he knew I was coming. There she is, he says. The doctor. Or what is it you do exactly? Residents? You teach the residents? I'm an attending cardiac surgeon, I say. I also teach a surgery rotation at Baylor. He waves this away with his beer hand. Right. Well, tonight we've got a real Baylor story to celebrate. He claps once in Kayla's direction. First year starts in August, right, kid? August 14th, Kayla says, and Aunt Diane's eyes shine. I find a seat near the edge of the room, in the chair that has always quietly been mine at these gatherings, slightly outside the main circle, at an angle that means I can see everyone but am not quite visible to them. My mother sits across the room and catches my eye once, briefly, and her look says the same thing it always says at these dinners. Please don't make this hard. I haven't made anything hard in 33 years. I'm not sure anyone has noticed. The dinner itself is the kind of dinner my grandmother's house produces, long and elaborate, with courses that arrive on silver trays carried by two people my grandmother employs for events like this. The dining room seats 12 and is full tonight, and I am seated between my young second cousin Marcus, who is 9 and interested primarily in his own phone, and an empty chair that fills partway through the first course when Uncle Derek's business partner arrives late and takes it with an apology that no one really hears. Kayla sits in the chair of honor to Mimi's right. I sit at the far end of the table. The conversation is Kayla and Baylor, and what Kayla plans to specialize in. Eventually she says cardiology, which makes several people look at me and then not look at me, and Kayla's study habits, and the MCAT score that Uncle Richard says was in the 97th percentile, and the personal statement that Aunt Diane says she cried reading. My grandmother listens to all of this with the focused pleasure of a woman who has been waiting for exactly this kind of news. Medicine is a real calling, Mimi says at one point, setting down her fork. It takes a certain kind of person, strength of character, discipline. She pauses. Not everyone is built for it. The pause lands on me the way pauses in this room often do. I keep my eyes on my plate. Uncle Derek leans back in his chair. Claire's built for the teaching side of it, he says. Not unkindly, the way people say things they think are compliments. Some people do the work. Some people explain the work. Both matter. 2 seats down, my mother takes a careful sip of her wine. Aunt Diane reaches over and pats Kayla's hand. Kayla was built for the work. She was, Mimi agrees. Kayla shifts in her chair. I notice it, the slight adjustment, the way her shoulders move, because I have been watching Kayla shift in chairs for the past 8 months, and I have learned to read what it means. Kayla's first rotation will be interesting, I say. My voice comes out quieter than I intend. But the table is quiet enough that it carries. Surgery lab starts in the first semester. It's intense. You've looked into the program? Aunt Diane asks, her eyebrows lifting in a way that manages to be both polite and slightly surprised, as if I've said something mildly unexpected. I fold my hands in my lap. I teach it, I say. The first silence is just a beat, the kind that happens when a room registers that something has been said but hasn't quite understood it yet. Uncle Derek sets his beer glass down. Come again? The surgery fundamentals rotation. At Baylor. I look up. I'm the instructor. I've been teaching it for 3 years. The second silence is longer. My Aunt Diane looks at my mother. My mother is looking at her wine glass. Mimi has gone very still in her chair, the way she goes still when she is thinking hard about something. Kayla's eyes find mine across the table. Her expression is the one I recognize from the first morning she walked into my skills lab, controlled, careful, measuring exactly how much to reveal. So, Uncle Richard says slowly, you're going to be teaching Kayla. I already have been, I say. She's been in my Saturday review sessions since February. Kayla reached out to me when she was preparing her application. We've been meeting once a week. The table absorbs this the way it absorbs information that rearranges too many things at once. You knew? Aunt Diane looks at Kayla with something that isn't quite betrayal but is in the neighborhood of it. Kayla sets down her fork with a small, precise sound. I knew Cousin Claire was a surgeon. I didn't know exactly what she taught until I looked up the faculty list when I was researching the program. She pauses. Then I emailed her. And she didn't tell us? Uncle Derek looks at me. I don't discuss my students with family, I say. I never have. She's not just a student, Aunt Diane says. She's family. Yes. Which is exactly why I was careful. Mimi's hand moves on the tablecloth, and the slight tremble of her fingers makes her rings catch the light from the chandelier. She looks at me, really looks at me, and something moves through her face that I haven't seen there before. Something that takes a moment to name. How long have you been on the Baylor faculty? She asks. 3 years full-time. Before that, adjunct for 2 years while I was completing my fellowship. 5 years. She says it quietly. Yes, Mimi. The grandfather clock in the hallway marks the half hour. Someone's fork scrapes against china. Uncle Derek's business partner, who has no idea what is happening, takes a roll from the breadbasket. You failed her first lab practical, Kayla says suddenly. The table turns to her. In February, she continues, looking at her plate. I walked into the skills lab thinking I knew everything. I'd done every prep module. I'd watched every surgical video. I'd read ahead. She looks up. She failed me. A 64. I had never failed anything in my life. Aunt Diane makes a sound that is not quite a word. I went home and cried for 2 hours, Kayla says. Then I went back the next Saturday. Because you wanted to? Uncle Derek asks. Because she asked me to. Kayla looks at me. She called me that same night. She said, "You know what you memorized. Come back and show me what you actually understand." She pauses. I didn't know the difference yet. She taught me the difference. The silence that follows is different from the earlier ones. It has a different texture. Mimi is watching me with an expression I cannot fully read. My mother has set down her wine glass and her hands are in her lap and she is looking at the tablecloth. Uncle Derek clears his throat. Well, that's... She rewrote the whole practical, Kayla says. Every answer. She came back the week after with ink on her hands and circles all over the margins, and she sat across from me for 3 hours, and we went through every single thing she'd gotten wrong. She half laughs. A short, disbelieving sound. She brought coffee. Good coffee. Not the stuff from the lab machine. I think of that Saturday morning. The gray February light through the skills lab windows. Kayla sitting across from me at the scarred lab table, her annotated notes spread between us. Her jaw set with the particular determination of someone who has decided something has changed. She's one of the strongest students I've worked with, I say. Her final practical score was 91. 91, Aunt Diane repeats, and now her voice has changed. She earned it, I say. I didn't give her anything. I don't give anyone anything, that's the point. Mimi makes a small sound. It might be the beginning of something she decides not to say. She picks up her water glass and takes a long sip, and when she sets it down, her expression has gone through some kind of internal revision. Charlotte should have told us, my mother says quietly. Her voice is not accusatory. It is something more complicated than that. Claire, I say, because my name is Claire, and has been Claire for 33 years, and in this house that fact is sometimes treated as optional. My mother looks up. Something moves through her face. Claire, she says softly, you should have told us. I have a strict policy about confidentiality with my students. Kayla understood that when she reached out to me, she asked me to keep it between us. I respected that. I pause. She was right to ask. This room is exactly why she asked. Nobody answers that. Kayla looks around the table at her mother, at Uncle Richard, at Mimi, at mine, and she does something I have only seen her do once before, during the hardest practical question I ever put in front of her. She straightens her spine to its full height. I found out she'd published a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, she says, last October. I read the whole thing. I read the citations. I looked up every study she mentioned. She pauses. That's when I emailed her. I didn't email her because she was family. I emailed her because she was the best person I could find. The best person she could find. I feel something loosen in the center of my chest that I didn't know was tight. Uncle Richard leans forward. Claire, I'll be honest. I didn't know you were faculty there. I thought you just worked at the hospital. I do work at the hospital, I say. I also teach. I also research. They're not separate things. We didn't know, Aunt Diane says. And there is something genuine in her voice now. An embarrassment that looks less like the social kind and more like the real kind. I know you didn't. I keep my voice even. I stopped explaining it. My mother flinches slightly. Just slightly. Just enough for me to see. The second course has been waiting, covered, on the sideboard for several minutes. The man who helps serve these dinners stands near the doorway with the professional patience of someone who has witnessed many family dinners and finds them all equally unremarkable. Mimi gives a small nod and he begins to move. Kayla and I don't speak again during dinner, not directly, but several times I feel her glancing down the table at me with an expression I've come to know well, the look she gets when she is filing something away. When she is learning something she intends to keep. After dessert, while my uncle takes his business partner out to the porch and my Aunt Diane follows my grandmother to the sitting room, and my mother lingers in the dining room with her wine in a way that means she wants to say something to me alone, I slip out through the kitchen door to the back garden. The Houston night has cooled to something almost bearable. The garden lights are on, making the oak trees look like something out of a photograph. I stand at the edge of the brick path and breathe in the smell of cut grass and night-blooming jasmine, and think about the drive back to my apartment, the papers waiting on my dining table, the case review I have at 7 in the morning. The door opens behind me. It's Kayla. She comes and stands beside me, her white dress almost glowing in the low garden light. She doesn't say anything for a moment. Neither do I. You didn't have to do all that, she says finally. I know. Inside, you could have just said you were faculty and left it there. You didn't have to explain the practical or, you did that, I say. I didn't say any of that. You did. She's quiet again. Was it really a 64? She asks. It was a 62, I say. I rounded up when I told the table. She laughs, and it's a real laugh, nothing like the ones I hear through the windows of this house. It sounds like someone who just had a weight lifted from their ribs. I almost withdrew my application that night, she says. After you called. I know. You told me. Did you think I would? I consider the question the way I consider all her questions honestly. For about 4 hours. Yes. Then I thought you'd come back. You have the kind of stubbornness that goes one way or the other, and I had a feeling about which way you'd go. She turns and looks at me. What did they say to you? Before I got in, when you came to dinners here, and Mimi would ask what you were doing, and the same things they always said. I keep my voice easy. Teaching's fine, but is it enough? Couldn't you find something more ambitious? Couldn't you have gone into a practice? You know. I know, she says quietly. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Her voice has the same quality it has when she challenges a premise in one of my lab discussions. Flat, factual, not angry, just unwilling to let something inaccurate pass uncorrected. It matters. What they said to you matters. It just doesn't change anything. That's different. I look at her and think, not for the first time, that she is going to be extraordinary at this. Go home, I tell her. Get some sleep. I'll see you in 2 months. In your classroom. In my classroom. She smiles, and the smile has a quality I remember from the morning she handed back her second practical, the pride of someone who has done something that is genuinely theirs. She goes back inside. I stay in the garden another 5 minutes and then follow. My mother is waiting for me near the kitchen, exactly where I knew she'd be. Her wine glass is empty now. She looks smaller in the kitchen light than she does in the dining room, which I've always thought says something about where she is most herself. Claire. She stops. Starts again. I called you Charlotte earlier. You did. I'm sorry. I look at her. Okay. I mean, she turns her wine glass in both hands, a thing she does when she is working through a feeling she hasn't named yet. I didn't know. About Baylor. About the teaching. About all of it. I told you I was on faculty 3 years ago. I know. I don't think I understood what that meant. It meant what it sounded like. She nods slowly, the way she nods when she is swallowing something she deserved to hear. I told Diane tonight that you were Kayla's instructor, and she's going to tell everyone. You know that. Okay. By Thursday your grandmother will have told her literary society. That's fine. She looks at me for a long moment, and her face does something it doesn't often do. It lets go of something it has been holding for a long time. I should have listened more carefully, she says. When you talked about your work? I should have, she stops. You would try to explain something at dinner, and I would redirect, and I didn't understand why you stopped trying. I stopped a few years ago, I say. I know when you stopped, she says it quietly. It was Thanksgiving. 4 years ago. You'd just published something, and I asked if you'd thought about going into a real practice. A private practice. She sets down the empty wine glass on the counter with a small, careful sound. I've thought about that dinner more times than I've admitted. The kitchen is quiet. Outside, through the window over the sink, I can see the garden lights and the edge of the oak tree I climbed as a kid. It's not too late to listen, I say. She looks up. If you want to know what I do, what it actually means, I'll tell you. I'd like to tell you. I pause. I've wanted to tell you for a long time. Her eyes go bright for a moment, the way eyes go bright when something that has been held back is released. She nods. I'd like that, she says. I would really like that. I hug her. She holds on longer than she usually does. I say goodbye to Mimi on my way out. My grandmother is in the sitting room with Aunt Diane, and when I lean in to kiss her cheek, she takes my hand and holds it for a moment. You should have told me, she says. About Baylor. You could have asked, I say, gently. She considers this with the frankness of someone who has reached the age where they can acknowledge a fair point without having to argue it. Yes, she says finally. I could have. She releases my hand. 91, she says quietly, almost to herself. She earned a 91. She worked for it. Good, Mimi straightens in her chair. That's how it should be. I drive home through the lit Houston streets with the windows down, which I almost never do, and the warm night air comes in smelling like rain that hasn't arrived yet. I think about the drive, the way I always think on drives about cases, about students, about what I should have said differently in a difficult lecture. But tonight I also think about the garden, about Kayla's laugh, about my mother's hands on the empty wine glass. I had a student in my second year of teaching at Baylor, not Kayla, a boy named Jordan from a small town in East Texas, who once told me after a particularly brutal practical debrief that he couldn't figure out if I was trying to make him better or just prove something to myself. I thought about that question for a week. At the end of the week, I told him, both. Honestly, both. And I hope that's okay. He was one of my best students. He's in his residency now at Vanderbilt, and he sends me a text every time he performs his first solo of something I taught him. Last month it was a coronary artery bypass. The text said, "First solo. I heard your voice the whole time. Thank you." I keep those texts in a folder on my phone labeled simply with the year. Kayla sends me an email that night, at 11:40. I see it when I'm at my kitchen table with a glass of water and my stack of unread journals. The subject line is blank. The body says only, "I wanted to choose this. I needed you to know that I chose it. Not because you were family, because you were the right person." I sit with that for a while. Then I write back, "I know. Now go to sleep." First lab practical is the third week of August, and I promise you it will not be easy. She replies with 3 question marks. I reply with a single period. She replies with a laughing emoji and then, "Good night, Cousin Claire." "Good night," I write back, and close my laptop. 2 months later, on the third week of August, Kayla walks into my skills lab for the first time, as an official Baylor student. She looks the way all first-year students look, slightly overwhelmed, trying not to show it, sitting up straight at the lab table as if posture can substitute for certainty. She is surrounded by 31 other students, none of whom know yet what this room will ask of them. I set the practical on the table in front of them, and watch 32 faces look down and begin reading. Halfway through the hour, I glance toward Kayla's seat. She is writing steadily, her pen moving without hesitation, her notes in the margins I taught her to leave in February. At one point she pauses, looks up, and finds my eye across the room. Her expression is focused and completely level, the expression of someone who has already decided where they are going. I give her a small nod, the same nod I give every student who is doing the work they came here to do. She goes back to writing. After the lab, when the other students have filed out and Kayla is gathering her things, she pauses at the door. "Aunt Diane called me this morning," she says. "Mimi is joining a medical literacy volunteer program. She wants to understand more about what surgeons actually do." I keep my face neutral. "That's admirable. She asked me to ask you if you'd be willing to speak to the group sometime." I pick up the stack of completed practicals and tap them even on the table. "I'll think about it." Kayla smiles. It is a full, real smile with nothing performed about it. "Also, Mom wants to take you to dinner. She said to tell you she's been reading your published papers, all of them. That must have kept her busy. She highlighted things." Kayla pauses at the door. I think she cried a little. She didn't say that, but I think she did. I think of my Aunt Diane at the dinner table, her hand on Kayla's knee, her voice carrying the certainty of a woman who knew which of her family's women mattered and had never thought to question the list. "Tell her Thursday works," I say. "I will." "And Kayla?" She turns back. "You've got the best score in the room on today's practical," I say. "Don't tell anyone I told you that." She holds very still for a second, and her eyes go bright in a way I recognize now, the particular brightness of someone who has done something that belongs entirely to them, that no one handed to them, that no name or connection or family gathering can claim any part of. "I won't tell anyone," she says. She walks out into the bright August morning, into the courtyard full of new first-year students blinking in the Texas heat, adjusting their lanyards and checking their schedules, and carrying their futures in their bags, like something they're still getting used to the weight of. I go back to my desk. I open the stack of practicals. I uncap my red pen. Somewhere in this stack of 32 attempts, there are minds beginning to wake up, students who have been performing excellence their whole lives and have never yet been asked to actually produce it. It is the part of this work that never gets easier and never gets old, finding the ones who are ready to find themselves, the ones who will come back the following Saturday, with the margins full of circles and ink on their hands, and the particular determination of someone who has decided that something has changed. I put my red pen to the first page. Outside, the August heat presses flat and white against the courtyard windows. Somewhere a door opens and closes, and the sound carries all the way down the hall to where I sit small, specific, and ordinary. The sound of a next thing beginning.